Hi, I'm Scott.
And I'm Sharla.
And welcome to another episode of Humanity, Human-Shaped Learning. And we're trying to throw you off. I have moved to the left.
I know, and it is throwing me off.
It's kind of weird. But here's the thing. I knew we needed to do it this way because this is my good side. Oh. See, I wanted to get my good side. So I'm here by the window, and we happen to be in my studio at my house,
which is very cool.
It's fairly cool. There's a lot of, it's really a mess. I've situated the camera so you can't see all the cords and everything that are going everywhere. But this is Dancing Moon Studio, where I do all my recording.
Yes.
Lots of fun.
And a beautiful place in the canyon.
Yeah. And if you hear any rumbling, I think there are some workers doing some work outside. So hopefully that rumbling will stay to a minimum. Most of the rumbling you hear will be that. Some of it might be my stomach. I don't know.
It's right before lunch.
That's right. Hey, whose episode is this?
This is mine.
All right. I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too. I told Scott I don't know how prepared I am. I wanted to sort of surprise myself.
That's great, because we always do try to keep it real fresh by not looking too closely at what we're going to be doing. And so, but usually you would have looked at it first.
Yeah, and I did.
Okay,
and actually something that's kind of exciting about this episode is it focuses on a big chunk of our work.
Oh, that's right. You did mention that. Yeah, I'm excited about that. This is great.
That's going to be kind of exciting for us to talk about, and also just to get some more information out to you all about the kind of work that we do. Yeah. And this particular episode, which is in the ballpark of the uniqueness part of our circle that we work through, actually we're dealing with the Green Siblings project, which is one of the projects that Scott and I have been working on for a couple years now in partnership with Treopia, Washington.
Yeah, we've worked with Treopia for quite a number of years, and she's been working in our state for a long time. She's a wonderful, wonderful person.
She really is. She is the sister to Ernest Green, who was the first senior to graduate out of Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, back in 1957-58.
Back in the day, if you remember, when President Eisenhower at the time, had to call in troops just to even have the black students be able to attend that high school.
And part of the reason we wanted to focus on this for this episode is because Martin Luther King Day is the day after this episode will come out. And so we thought, well, maybe some teachers might be interested in even just sharing either some of the work from this or the information from this episode, or some of the resources we'll be sharing with you.
That's right.
So as we get started, actually what we chose today for a third thing, or I should say I chose this one.
That's okay.
Yeah, I chose this for our third thing. It's a video of Treopia. So we get to hear some of her words of wisdom, and you get a chance to meet her virtually. And so we're going to listen to something that Treopia has to say about identity. And so that's going to be our focus today. And
we'll put the link up there on the screen for you. All of this stuff is at greensiblingsproject.org, I believe. And so we'll pull up Treopia, and we'll just give a listen to this interview with Treopia, Washington.
I still think all people know too little about other people. You can't help, when you get to know people and know them as people without stereotyping, you just think, good things happen. I think about, when Todd was in elementary school, and one of the things, again, this is from home, you never label people by color. That just was not. So I was trying to find out who his teacher was. So I said, well, what does she look like? She's okay. Okay. What color is her hair? I don't know, but what color are her eyes? I don't know. So I was not going to, so I found it was not until PTA that I went up there and I found out who she was. but that's, I really think that not only do people not know other people, but there is this, in some cases, this built-in stereotype that just some people can't get rid of. And until people can accept other people. You know, the other thing too, I feel so privileged and blessed to have had a chance to travel, meet people all over the country and literally the world. And it helps you realize that there is more about us that is alike than that is different. And just like my mother said, there are people you're going to like of all races, people who you're going to like less. And but people have these built-in stereotypes. And it also, I think the fact that I often talk about my experience when I went to Australia. It was really good for me. I was walking down the street and I kept bumping into people. I said, okay, Treopia, you're doing something wrong. So I stood back against the building and I watched. And I realized that there everything went from the left and we're accustomed to doing things from the right. Which taught me, said, just because you do something one way doesn't mean that it's wrong. Other people do things another way, and it's right. But I think so many times people don't, if anything is different, it's bad, it's negative. But it's such a rich experience to be around and to have experiences with people whose backgrounds and experiences are different from yours. It's just, that's why I love going out to South Dakota. It's so different, but I love it. I love it. It's I don't know, but that, you know, I think too many people are insular. They only relate to what they know at that moment in terms of what their experience has been there. And it doesn't work.
She's one of my favorite people to listen to. Treopia is just, she's got so much wisdom to share, and I really appreciate her perspective and how she's used the experiences of her family to really have that be a part of everything she does. Mm-hmm. In her work, in her friendships, in her contacts with people like us who are, I mean, we're friends, but we do a lot of work together, and it's just been wonderful. She's someone I've learned a lot from.
I just love how interested she is, as she was saying, in going places and being among people who are different and experiencing what life is like, what people are like, and just, you know, and being open to that.
Right.
Because too many people are just not even open to that. Just want to stay in my safe space.
Yes.
You know?
And, you know, in that whole area of uniqueness, that is a part of being human, is we each have our unique life experience, set of life experiences, I should say, where depending on where we grew up, depending on what kind of home life we had, what our interactions were in communities, in churches, school, all of those things impact who we are. Mm-hmm. And they make us very unique. And the thing that I appreciate about what Treopia shared in that video to get us started today is how she says that's the beauty.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing but beauty there in how people become who they are.
Yeah.
Even the tough things they're a part of how we become the human that we are. And so the importance then becomes in knowing that,
right,
and acknowledging that those differences are a good thing, and that it is, I think, on us each individually to figure out, so what do we do with that in our lives?
Well, you know what struck me is when she tells the story about going to Australia, and she keeps bumping into people and stuff like. The first thing that she says is, "Okay, Treopia, you're doing something wrong." And so her first response is, "Okay, I'm in Australia and I keep bumping into people." And her first response is not, "Well, why are these people so stupid? Why do they keep bumping into me?" I clearly am doing something wrong. So she steps back away and she watches for a little bit, and she realizes, oh, okay, I'm trying to walk on the side. I'm trying to move to the side that we do when we're driving in the US, which is the opposite here in Australia. And that's why naturally I go that way and they go that way too, and so we bump. But that's just one little example of, whenever I am among people who maybe are coming from a different place than myself, they're in a different culture, they're in a different language, different customs, is my first reaction, okay, Scott, things are not going well. What am I doing? What do I need to stop and watch here for a second before I go on hurting people,
Right.
And then blaming them because we got hurt,
Right. So what we've done with this information that Treopia has shared and her brothers have shared is we've tried to create a resource for educators and beyond. I think it works for people outside the education world as well, but it's we call it our social justice workshop. And one of the things I'd like to share with you today then for our content piece that this third thing supports is our website and some of the resources that Scott will share here on the screen. And so one of the ways that we have gone about trying to work with this information that we've gotten from Treopia and her brothers is to think through, so how do we help other people learn from this in the best way possible?
Yeah.
And one of the things that we came up with was this whole idea of being part of different circles of identity. And so today, dealing with uniqueness, we're starting at that very base point, the individual, who we are as individuals, because that's really the only part we have total control over as far as what our experience has been and how things impact us in the world.
Well, and all those other rings, the other things, family, community, various communities I'm part of, and then all of humanity have an influence on me, I have an influence on them, but then they shift and change, because I may be part of one community that is somehow at odds with another community or something. So then I end up being kind of an ambassador between the two, help these folks that, help my chess club understand the needs of my knitting group.
We've been watching Queen's Gambit.
That's right. We've been watching Queen's Gambit. But anyway, I mean, that's a really silly kind of example, but in many ways, we really find ourselves dealing with those tensions that are out there in society.
Yes.
If my family is at odds with this other group, then I somehow have to, see myself as an ambassador to help my family understand this other group, or help this other group understand my family's perspective, and then all of that impacts me and reshapes me as an individual, because those are some of our most important skills. How do I engage with other people who are different than me?
So when we think about being an individual, certainly impacted by the family we grow up in, but we are still separate from that. And I think what this course has done, and I know it really helped me when we were developing this course, to think through all of the different parts of who I am as this unique person that I am from my experiences, and how that impacts me with my relationship to my family. And as you can see in these circles, going out from there, from the family to the community or communities that I'm a part of, whether it be the actual town I'm growing up in or different kinds of communities like school communities and church communities and clubs and things that we do that are the people that we're interacting with on a regular basis. And you can see how things get more and more difficult.
Yeah.
When you think of all these different people who are constantly interacting with one another.
For instance, my community, a community could be a political affiliation.
Sure.
So then if I am in my family, but my family is, a large portion of them are of a different political affiliation than the political affiliation that I see myself being part, then I've got those challenges that it's not all as you know, it in some ways this tree thing can't possibly show the complexity of that, because my family may not all be. I may be more at odds with some family members than I am with somebody in my community.
Sure, sure. And when you reach out beyond community, so all these people that we kind of know each other, into all of humanity,
yeah,
it's no wonder that we have issues at times, or we bump into each other, like Treopia talked about, actually very, specifically bumped into someone who was walking on the different side of the direction that we would normally walk in where we're from.
And the other thing she mentioned, though, that was really important, I think, was stereotypes.
Yes.
What can happen is if I am not a part of a particular community, I'm part of another community, I may look at that group and be operating under a bunch of stereotypes. And those are not things that I'm necessarily even thinking consciously about. They're those unconscious biases that I have. I just automatically assume that if you're with those folks, then you're probably thinking this. And I really don't know that. I really don't know that because I'm not part of that community. But one way to begin to address some of those stereotypes is if I am in relationship with someone who's a part of that community, then I begin to understand through their eyes a little bit more.
This is kind of a silly example, but I grew up all my years in South Dakota and from farming families. One of the things that I was told when I was little is true farmers, true Western folk are West River. The Missouri River cuts through our state, and you can tell West River from an East River by the hat they wear, because on the West River side, you wear a cowboy hat.
Sure.
And on the East River side, you wear a baseball cap.
Right.
As a farmer. And so as you would see people, I can remember just as a kid growing up and noticing, because I had family and people that I interacted with in a variety of places, seeing that they were wearing a baseball cap as they did their farm work. And I'd think, oh, you're one of those. Now, it's kind of a silly thing.
Yeah.
But it started very young because it was just part of that culture. That identity was, in Pierre, which is right on the river. We should be the most accommodating on both sides. It wasn't, we were considered West River there. And so it was very important that you wore a cowboy hat and cowboy boots.
What I find interesting is one of the things that Treopia shared, and we're kind of blurring the third thing into the article here now, but that she was so very much aware of and careful about not promoting the stereotype that they would not refer to someone in terms of their color or their race or anything like that. It was just, what's your teacher like, that sort of thing. So there's this awareness that was there. That's a part of it. And I, as a mom, you want to know, because there's a piece of us, if I'm sending my son into a situation I want to know whether or not his teacher is going to be able to connect and understand and be responsive to him in certain ways. But at the same time, I don't want to ask it in a way that just causes my son to react to her being this color or that color. And I think those are, I'm so glad she shared that, because that's a real difficult thing. There's this awareness of race and of color, but at the same time, this relationship to it that we want to make sure that that stays in the right place, that it doesn't become something that creates those unhelpful stereotypes, those bias that stimulates those biases, you know?
Right. And we did some thinking around that.
Yeah.
And we actually created another visual that we thought helped to explain this whole idea of loss and growth as we go through life. And so Scott's sharing this image that we created as we talked through what actually happens to individuals. You know, when an individual is born and in their early growing up years, there isn't as much emphasis put on how am I different from everyone else, but rather you're looking for these little ones to be growing and becoming human beings. Are they able to speak?
Yeah.
Are they able to walk?
And I've got a brand new grandson, and like no one at this point is like really into correcting him.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's just like not the first thing you do. They don't come out and you say, well, that's not how you say I'm hungry. You know, you don't scream that. No, what we do is we accept their communication. We accept their things that they're doing. And we just embrace all of that because we know, first of all, to start correcting, to start shaping, to start requiring them to communicate in a certain way. They're just not capable of that.
Right.
And that can do horrible things to a child if you just right off the bat. But then there comes a time later on when they begin to realize, oh, not everybody understands.
And so I think this does a nice job of showing that.
Yeah.
This image, this idea that we're all born into equity and integrity.
Yeah.
But as we go through life, we begin to experience division. You know, think about your school experiences. When you suddenly, those first memories of realizing that you were very different from someone in your class, you know, or that you didn't have something that someone else had, or maybe that you did have things that other people didn't have. All of those things start to divide us and cause us to see us as different. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes it's used that way.
Well, but in this graphic, you know, which we tried to develop after having listened to Treopia and Ernest and Scott Green talk about things, try to develop a way to visualize that. Well, they're in 1957 in the heart of the Jim Crow South, with segregation at its one of its worst points, and trying to desegregate a school, and they actually have to call in the military to be able to do it. That's right there in the middle, where you're at the epicenter of inequality and segregation. We're so different that we stay apart. You know, black people in Little Rock could not go to restaurants. They couldn't stay in hotels. They had to stay separate. They couldn't drink out of the same drinking fountains, use the same restrooms. And the big key with that was there's not a separate but equal.
Right.
That when they had different schools, that difference was inherently not equal. So they had absolute inequality and segregation, and that's what the Brown versus Board of Education, that's what that ruling was trying to solve.
And that first step that it was working towards was that idea of creating equality and desegregating.
Right.
But as we learned from Treopia, that's not our end goal. Our goal is not just simply to desegregate, meaning that everybody has access to the same thing and we're going to be in the same building together, but that we actually are integrating
Yeah.
With one another, meaning that our friendships, our relationships, our community is brought in to include people outside of who has been in my immediate family, people who are different from me. And as we move into that way of seeing the world and being in the world, we hopefully can see the signs of where there is equality, but equity is still lacking. And that's something we talk a lot about in schools.
And that, you know, that shift, I think about that shift from that equality and desegregation apple over to the equity and integration. That requires a lot. I mean, it requires me, first of all, if I'm going to truly integrate, I'm not just going to say, yeah, I'm going to sit here next to you, but I'm going to integrate. It means that I've got to open myself up to the potential tension of you see it this way, I see it this way, but we're still going to work it out. We're going to make things, we're going to become friends, we're going to have a relationship, we're going to figure out how to make this work. And then with equality versus equity, you know, it's not enough just to say, okay, we're going to cut the cookie in half, okay, and I'm going to take half and you're going to take half. If I just finished a nice big meal and you haven't eaten in a couple of weeks, then half a cookie's not going to do what it needs to do for you, you know? And so that equity is a recognition of not just what keeps everything equal, but how do we make sure that every human being has what they need to move forward, you know?
And as we think about Martin Luther King Jr. And his work around civil rights in our country, it's a celebration of this, of acknowledging that when we look back at that image again, he was very aware of the inequality in that place right in the middle of segregation. And his work, his life's work, was about moving out of that and into a place of not only equality, but equity. And so as we celebrate him this month and this week, you know, are there ways that we could think about doing that are represented?
And I think it's a challenge, because I think sometimes we get hung up on, have we made progress or haven't we? And I think we have to say, yes, we've made progress. Thank goodness things aren't the way they were back in 1957 or back in 1963. But that doesn't mean we don't have improvement that needs to be made. And I think that's what's good about right now, being aware of some of the challenging things that are going on around us in our nation, in our, you know, there's still growth to be had. And, you know, as educators, we know that learning doesn't stop. We don't get to a certain point and say, yep, there we go, we're done. No more learning for me. I made it. No, there's always improvement to be made. And that includes how we relate to each other, you know?
Yes. When I was teaching third grade, I would usually do a lesson around this you know, I'd try to do something with my 8 and 9-year-olds that would help them understand this whole idea. And one of the things that I was always struck by is how shocked they were when I would show maybe some images from the segregated South in the Jim Crow era, and they would go, that's terrible. And these young people, granted, they were at an age where they still maybe weren't fully aware of those differences that are present in the world. But the fact that they saw how opposite of what we want the world to be like that was. I always brought that up to them. And I'd say, I can see the growth in our country, in our communities, in you, as you express your frustration with the fact that this is part of our history.
And I think that's what's beautiful about that, is that I think that's natural to being a human being. I mean, I think we come into the world being able to see inequity and unfairness, and being able to say, no, that's not right. That's to have something at our core that says that's not right. But unfortunately, we do learn to just say, well, that's the way things are, I guess. Maybe that's the way it'll always be. And then we just become victims or perpetuators, of things that are really unfair, because we kind of just get used to it.
Right.
I don't know.
So what we have shared today so far is just a tiny glimpse into the work.
Oh, and there's tons of interviews. I'll just say this, one of the things that when we were working with Treopia that she was excited about, a lot of the work that we've done with indigenous communities in North and South Dakota, about interviewing and the value of seeing an elder and hearing an elder's voice and listening to their story. That's really what we wanted to capture with the Green siblings. And so there's hours of interviews, video interviews with Treopia, with Ernest, and with Scott, and with Robin White, who's the administrator there at the National Park site that is Central High School now, I just could sit and listen to them talk all day long.
I know, me too. And we have.
Yeah, we have.
And actually, we have a documentary coming out very soon. In fact, for February is our hope.
Yeah. Wow, I better get cracking on the editing.
So we hope you'll take some time to dig into more of this information that we've shared with you today, that you'll take a look at that and see where it might fit into your own personal learning, or maybe into your classroom if you happen to be a teacher.
Yeah. So. And I'll just say this, a lot of times, like around MLK Day and all of that, we think about these really the things that we hold up as the most central piece of the civil rights era and all of that. And those are incredibly important. Things like Central High School and the desegregation, or the March on Washington with MLK. I think we've got to make sure we look around us too and say, what's happening with civil rights right now where I live? What are the issues right now where I live? And that's so incredibly, incredibly important. And I think that's one of the reasons why Treopia wanted so badly to communicate their story in this way, because she didn't feel it was just a story about 1957 and back in the day. It was a story that has resonance for right now, wherever you are, wherever we are,
Right.
Yeah.
So dig into that and see what you can find that's helpful to you. So, do you have a quote for me today?
I think I do. I'll pull it up on the screen there for everybody to see.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is I love Amy Poehler. She's awesome, and and you don't necessarily think of Amy Poehler for her wisdom. Okay, you think of her for her comedic wisdom, her funniness. How hilarious she is. But I really like this. This is a really brief and really straightforward, simple quote from Amy Poehler. Change the world by being yourself. And I love that, because I think the first thing I always think when I think I really want to make a difference, I really want to change the world, the first thing I think about is how should I be different? Okay? Maybe sometimes that's good. Maybe there are some things some new skills I need to pick up, some changes but the biggest way you can change the world is to figure out truly who I am and be that, because nobody else can do that. Nobody else can be that.
And the world misses out.
Yeah.
When you aren't you, the world misses out.
Yeah.
I love it. I love the fact that when we choose quotes for each other, we have no idea what the other person's going to talk about.
Yeah.
And this is so perfect for what we talked about today.
And it's so perfect for Treopia and for Ernest and for that, because Treopia, my gosh, she has made such a difference in our state, in South Dakota, just by her coming up here and being exactly who she is.
Yes.
It's just incredible.
Yes.
Well, hey, thanks. We'll be back again with another episode next week.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.